I just want to go back to my hotel room and cry. Hi, I'm Jeff. Check. Okay, who am I? Why am I standing here? I run a little mom and pop shop called Spiderweb Software. We're based in Seattle. We are older than the stones in the dirt. There's my URL, Twitter, and a blog upon which I've written a fair amount on this topic, which is why I'm standing here. And what do? We write fantasy role-playing games, really old school, cheap, retro, Mac, Windows, iPad, Linux, and Android. I can get someone to do the port for me. Very text-heavy, very story-heavy. Most importantly, all of our games, while not identical, are very similar. That'll become relevant when comparing sales later on. Here's a list of our games. Don't be ashamed if you haven't heard any of any of them. I don't write hits. Don't get me wrong, I love hits, I'd love to have one, but I'm in the business of writing respectable niche titles in order to make a respectable middle-class income. Here is a picture of my latest game for the iPad. You can see that, it's fine, it's basic, it's simple, it's functional. I mean, it's not going to set the world on fire, but I'm also not publicly soiling myself either. So I want to talk about the indie glut, the indie boom and bust, or as it is commonly known, an economic phenomenon, I believe, called the business cycle, which is much discussed and I will get back to in more detail in just a minute. When I wrote about this, I used the term the indie bubble, which is a really nice clickbaity title. It got me a lot of attention. It is not technically true. It is not a classic speculative bubble in any way. I also will not be using the word indie-pocalypse, not because the word is silly, childish, and reductive. I like things that are silly, childish, and reductive. I'm just not really going to use the word because it's basically inaccurate. There is no apocalypse. Indie games aren't going to go away because we're awesome and people love what we do, but business circumstances change and we need to pay attention. So I'm going to tell you a little very brief story about what I think happened that will require proof, and I'm going to be chipping in some of my sales figures just to point in the direction of what might be going on. This is just going to be a few points of data. It's not going to prove anything, but it is a start towards accumulating data and telling stories. So what's the story? Around 2008, there was a confluence of three big events. First of all, AAA development could arguably be called very stagnant with not a lot of innovation. A lot of people were getting kind of tired of what they were doing. At the same time, a bunch of indie developers showed that they could really bring really compelling, awesome, high-quality products to market, while at the same time, indie-friendly stores like Xbox Live, like iTunes, like Steam became available. And as someone who's scrambled for individual share sales on CompuServe in the 1990s can tell you, Steam is an infinite bag of miracles. Indie games became really hot all of a sudden. There was a big demand for them. People like me, who had a back catalog that went on for days, were able to make far more money than we deserved. Demand became really high. Oh my God, indie games are cool. A lot of people flooded into the market. A lot of indie games started being written because people want to follow their dreams. So demand's really high. Supply goes up to meet demand. So what happened was, first, and this happens all the time in all sorts of businesses, there's a growth period, a new market with a lot of demand appears. People see that there's money to be made, they flood in, supply goes up to meet demand, but the supply keeps coming in. That's when you pass the peak and you enter what I believe we have been in for a while now, which is the recession period, which is the long, gruesome, agonizing, bloody process where the supply, also known as human beings following their dreams, goes down until it meets demand. And there are some hard realities. Human beings only own finite money. There's only a finite number of gaming websites. They only have a finite number of space to put new articles. If titles keep flooding in, there's just not enough. And that's what leads to the painful recession process that I believe is happening. But there is no apocalypse. Indie games aren't going anywhere. We're a thing. I mean, we're $1 billion a year business. That's amazing. There's just going to be the occasional adjustment and the occasional necessary shrinkage. Was anything I just said true? Really? I'm going to tell you sales from my last 4 games, and you can see my story and make your judgments from there. I'm going to be talking about my last 4 retro role-playing games. There's Abaddon and Abaddon 2, which are new IP, and Avernum and Avernum 2, which are remasters of older games. For comparing, it's better to compare games from like series. You can see the years they came out. Earlier was very much when indie games were go-go hooray, and the last one came out last year when maybe not so much. I raised the price for the 4th game because I, had to so my business wouldn't explode. It's hard to do research on this topic because it's hard to compare 2 games, because comparing sales of 2 games is really apples and oranges, which is why I think I can be useful, because my games are really similar. They all have the same style. They are all the same sort of game. They're all for the same platform. They all get most of their sales from the same place. They all do their PR in the usual word-of-mouth bargain basement kind of way. There's just a couple differences I'll point out for the sake of intellectual rigor. The earlier games got a lot more press and a lot more bundle coverage, although I think that's more of a factor of it being early in the indie boom before the glut happened. And also, obviously, the earlier games have been outlawed.